I never thought betrayal would arrive so quietly that it didn't come with shouting or slammed doors. It didn't even come with a confession. It arrived in the space between two heartbeats, in the pause after a touch that lingered a second too long. And by the time I realized something had shifted, I was already standing on the wrong side of the line. Noah Whitmore and I had been together for 4 years, long enough to memorize each other's breathing patterns, long enough to mistake routine for security. When we met, everything felt urgent and electric. He was bold where I was cautious, charming where I was reserved. I remember thinking that loving him felt like stepping into sunlight after years indoors. That we moved in together after 2 years. A small apartment with creaking floors and windows that let in too much wind during winter. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. We built rituals, Sunday coffee runs, late-night movie marathons, quiet mornings where neither of us spoke but everything felt understood. Somewhere along the way, the understanding faded. That it wasn't sudden. Noah didn't wake up one morning as a different person. The change was gradual, almost polite. He started working later. His phone buzzed more often. He smiled at messages he didn't explain. When I asked about his day, his answers shortened from stories to summaries. Long day, he'd say, already scrolling. That I told myself relationships evolved. Passion cooled. Stability replaced spark. That was normal, wasn't it? But stability isn't supposed to feel like invisibility. That I began noticing the quiet details. The way Noah angled his phone away from me without thinking. The way he sighed when I asked if he'd be home for dinner. The way our conversations turned transactional. Who's buying groceries? Did you pay the internet bill? As if we were roommates managing logistics instead of partners building a life. One night, I tried to tell him how I felt. I just miss us, I said, my voice careful, measured. Noah barely looked up from the television. You're overthinking again, Ethan. Overthinking. The word settled over me like dust. It was easier for him to believe I was imagining distance than to admit he felt it too. After that, I stopped bringing it up. Noah's best friend, Julian Mercer, had always hovered at the edge of our lives. He and Noah went back to college, shared history, shared secrets, shared jokes I was never fully part of. Julian was confident in a quiet way, the kind of person who observed more than he spoke. He had a steady presence that filled a room without demanding attention. At first, I saw him as an extension of Noah. Someone safe because he belonged to Noah's world, but Julian noticed things Noah didn't. The first time it happened, the three of us were at our apartment. Noah had stepped out to take a call, leaving Julian and me alone in the kitchen. I was rinsing glasses, trying not to think about how long Noah had been outside. You okay? Julian asked. It was a simple question, but his tone held something different, intentional, focused. I'm fine, I replied automatically. Julian didn't look convinced. You don't have to pretend with me. The words unsettled me. Pretend. As if he could see the effort it took to hold myself together. I'm not pretending, I said, though even to my ears it sounded unsteady. He nodded slowly, like he was filing the moment away instead of challenging it. Noah returned then, laughter loud and careless, and whatever had almost formed between Julian and me dissolved back into normalcy. But after that night, I became aware of Julian's attention, not flirtation. Not anything obvious. Just awareness that if Noah interrupted me mid-sentence, Julian would circle back later and ask what I had been saying. If I went quiet during a group conversation, Julian's eyes would flick toward me, measuring. It wasn't dramatic. It was subtle. And that subtlety made it dangerous. Weeks passed. Noah grew busier. I grew quieter. Our anniversary slipped by with a distracted dinner and a half-hearted apology about deadlines. I told him it was okay. I always told him it was okay. It was easier than admitting it wasn't. The night everything shifted began with another cancellation. Noah had promised to be home early. I had cooked, nothing extravagant, just pasta and a bottle of wine we'd been saving. I lit candles anyway, even though part of me knew better. At 8:17 p.m., my phone buzzed, running late. Don't wait up. No apology. No explanation. I stared at the message until the screen dimmed. The apartment felt too quiet, too arranged. The candles burned down unevenly, wax pooling like something wasted. A knock at the door startled me that I wasn't expecting anyone. For a second, I thought maybe Noah had decided to surprise me after all. But when I opened the door, Julian stood there, hands tucked into his jacket pockets. "Hey," he said gently. "Noah told me he couldn't make it tonight." I was nearby. I almost asked how he knew about dinner, but the question felt small compared to the relief of not being alone. "I've got wine," he added, holding up a bottle like proof of harmless intent that I hesitated for only a moment before stepping aside. That we sat at the small kitchen table meant for two. The candles were still burning, casting shadows across Julian's face. He noticed the setup immediately. He forgot again. He asked that I didn't answer right away. I focused on pouring the wine, watching the liquid rise in the glass. "It's not a big deal," I said. Julian leaned back in his chair, studying me. "Ethan, you made it a big deal." Something in his voice, soft but unwavering, unraveled the careful composure I'd been maintaining for months. "I just wanted one night," I admitted. "One night where I didn't feel like an afterthought." The words hung between us, fragile and exposed. Julian didn't rush to fill the silence. He didn't defend Noah. He didn't offer easy reassurances. He simply listened. "You deserve more than that," he said finally. No one had said that to me before. Not in a way that felt deliberate. The wine warmed my chest, loosening the restraint I usually carried. I told him things I hadn't told anyone, how small I'd started to feel, how I questioned whether I was asking for too much, how I wondered if love was supposed to feel like this after 4 years. Julian's expression never shifted into pity. It stayed steady, grounded. At some point, I realized we were sitting closer than before. I couldn't remember when the space between our chairs had disappeared. "Have you told him all this?" Julian asked quietly. "I tried," I said. "He thinks I'm overthinking." Julian's jaw tightened slightly. "You're not." The certainty in his voice did something to me. It made me feel seen in a way I hadn't in months. Without thinking, I let my hand rest on the table, palm up, vulnerable. It wasn't an invitation. It was exhaustion. Julian looked at it for a second too long, then he placed his hand over mine. The contact was light. Warm. Steady. That I should have pulled away. Instead, I felt my shoulders relax, as if my body had been waiting for permission to stop holding itself together. We didn't say anything. We didn't need to. The silence was no longer empty, it was charged, and in that charged stillness, I understood something I had been avoiding. This wasn't just comfort. This was a shift. Julian's thumb brushed against my knuckles, barely there, testing that. I looked down at our hands, then up at him. He didn't move closer. He didn't push. He just waited, and that was the moment I realized the truth, that he wasn't the only one crossing a line, that I was the one not stopping him. I didn't pull my hand away that night, but I told myself it didn't mean anything. When Julian Mercer finally stood to leave, the candles had burned down to pale stubs and the apartment smelled faintly of wax and wine. He paused at the door, searching my face as if waiting for me to redefine what had just happened. I gave him nothing, no label, no promise, no rejection. "Text me if you need to talk," Julian said quietly. "Need." The word lingered long after the door closed. Noah Whitmore didn't come home until after midnight. I pretended to be asleep when he slipped into bed, his movements careful but distant. He didn't touch me. He didn't apologize. The space between us felt wider than the mattress. The next morning, he kissed my shoulder absent-mindedly while checking his phone. "Sorry about last night," he murmured. "Work's been insane." I almost told him Julian had been there. I almost confessed how close we'd sat, how my pulse had quickened beneath someone else's attention. But the confession would have required an explanation I wasn't ready to give. "It's fine," I said instead. The lie came easier than I expected. Over the next few days, I became acutely aware of my own behavior. I kept my phone face down. I flinched when it buzzed. I measured my words around Noah as if any sudden movement might reveal something I hadn't even defined. Julian didn't text the next morning. Or the afternoon. When my phone finally lit up that evening, my chest tightened before I even read the message. "How are you?" 2 simple words. No reference to the night before. No pressure. I stared at the screen longer than necessary. Responding felt like choosing something. I'm okay, I typed. Then, after a pause, thanks for coming over. The three dots appeared almost immediately. Anytime. That should have been the end of it. Gratitude. Closure. A line drawn quietly back into place, but the following week, Noah canceled dinner again, and this time, I didn't light candles. Julian and I started meeting in neutral spaces, coffee shops, a quiet park bench near his apartment, anywhere that didn't feel like a direct betrayal. We didn't touch. We didn't flirt openly. On the surface, it looked like friendship. Underneath, something else was taking root. Julian asked questions Noah no longer thought to ask. "What do you want?" he said once, his gaze steady. Not "what do you need from Noah?" Not "what's wrong?" Just "what do you want?" That I didn't have an answer. That I had spent so long adjusting myself around Noah's absences that I'd forgotten my own outline point. One afternoon, as we sat across from each other in a quiet cafe, Julian leaned forward slightly. "You don't look happy, Ethan." "I'm not unhappy," I replied automatically. He held my gaze. "That's not the same thing." The precision of his observation unsettled me. He wasn't trying to rescue me. He wasn't offering grand declarations. He was simply reflecting back what I refused to examine. At home, Noah seemed vaguely aware that something had shifted. "You've been quiet lately," he said one evening, glancing at me from the couch. "I'm always quiet," I answered. He frowned slightly, as if sensing the deflection but lacking the energy to challenge it. "Are we okay?" The irony of the question almost made me laugh. Were we okay? We functioned. We shared bills. We shared a bed. But intimacy had thinned into habit, and habit had disguised itself as stability. "I don't know," I admitted. Noah's expression hardened, not with anger, but with discomfort. "Where is this coming from?" From missed dinners. From unanswered questions. From feeling invisible in my own relationship. From a hand on mine that made me feel seen. But I didn't say any of that. "I just feel distant," I told him carefully. He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "I've just been stressed." "Don't make it bigger than it is." "Don't make it bigger." Again, my feelings reduced to exaggeration. Later that night, as Noah slept beside me, I scrolled through my messages with Julian. There was nothing incriminating, no explicit words, no confessions. Yet the thread felt intimate in a way my relationship no longer did. That realization carried more weight than any physical boundary we hadn't crossed. A few days later, Julian invited me over to his apartment to watch a game. I almost declined. The invitation felt heavier than coffee or park benches. It felt intentional. "You don't have to come," he added when I hesitated. The choice was mine. That was what made it dangerous. When I arrived, the atmosphere was calm, uncharged. The television played softly in the background, barely noticed. We sat on opposite ends of the couch at first, a careful distance that acknowledged awareness. "You've been thinking a lot," Julian observed. "So have you," I replied. He didn't deny it. "I care about him," I said suddenly, the word surprising even me. "About Noah." "I know," Julian answered. His lack of challenge disarmed me. He wasn't positioning himself as a replacement. He wasn't demanding loyalty. He was simply present. "Then why does this feel like," I trailed off, "like something you shouldn't want?" He finished quietly. I swallowed. Julian shifted closer, slowly enough to give me time to object. "I didn't." "This isn't about stealing you," he said. "It's about whether you're already gone." The question struck deeper than accusation would have. Was I already gone? When Noah and I argued now, it felt rehearsed. When Julian and I talked, it felt immediate. That contrast terrified me. A sudden knock at the door made us both freeze. Julian frowned. "I'm not expecting anyone." My pulse spiked for reasons I couldn't explain. He stood and crossed the room, opening the door. Noah stood in the hallway. The air shifted instantly. His eyes moved from Julian to me, taking in the scene with quiet calculation. Not dramatic. Not explosive. Just observant. "Ethan," he said, surprise sharpening his tone. "You didn't tell me you were here." "I didn't think I needed to," I replied, though the defensiveness in my voice betrayed me. Silence stretched between the three of us. Noah stepped inside without being invited. His gaze lingered on the space between Julian and me, the distance that had been smaller moments before. How long? Noah asked, his voice steady but strained. Nothing happened, I said quickly. Julian didn't speak. That's not what I asked, Noah replied. The truth settled heavily in my chest. He wasn't asking about physical acts. He was asking about the shift, the absence he'd felt but refused to name. That I looked at Noah, really looked at him. For the first time in months, he seemed fully present, and I realized something that hurt more than being caught: that I hadn't cheated in a single reckless moment, that I had drifted, that I had stepped outside a relationship long before Julian's hand ever touched mine. It's not about him, I said quietly. It's about us. Noah's jaw tightened, pain flickering across his face. Julian moved toward the door, sensing what didn't belong to him. I'll give you two space, he murmured. The door closed behind him, leaving Noah and me alone in a room that suddenly felt unfamiliar. For the first time in a long time, there were no distractions. No buzzing phones. No excuses, just the truth, standing between us, and I understood that whatever happened next wouldn't just define my relationship with Julian. It would decide whether Noah and I had already lost each other long before that night ever began.